Hello, welcome to the Home Ground. David Bash here with Max Schiffman. As always, Max, we're about to embark on the silly season of sport in Australia. Are you an observer or a participator?
Well, it's going to be a bit of both. I mean, we've got the Australian Golf Open kicking it off, and then that's going to go right into the tennis season, which is one of my favourite parts of the year. So this year, I think I'll be watching some on TV, and actually I'll be overseas for the Australian Open this year for the first time in a long time, so I won't get to see it in person.
Well, we've got one of the most intriguing sports executives. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome Paul McNamee, a former Dual Davis Cup winner, #1 in doubles, and a long-time CEO of the Australian Open and tournament director at the AO. Paul, welcome.
Thank you. I'm actually still the immediate past.
Are you?
Tournament director, because Craig's been there nearly 20 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but no, it's great to be here and with you guys and talking about something we love, which is sport and all sport, not just tennis, but all sport.
Before we get on to your sports executive career, which has been long and varied, it's quite an incredible story. Reflect back on your playing days as a Davis Cup winner, a world #1 in doubles, a semi-finalist in singles. Was there any moment as a player that sparked your intrigue in the future as an executive?
Oh, well, I was on the board of the ATP, so I was interested in the kind of the way that I saw the tournament side, because as a player, you really don't understand what goes on behind the scenes. You just rock up, everything's there for you. And so when I started the Hopman Cup with Charlie Fankin and Pat Cash in Perth the first year, a player broke his string, Shuzo Matsuoka from Japan, and he'd given his strings to one of our staff, and they said, "What are we supposed to do?" "Oh, we don't have a restring." I hadn't organised it. So you don't realise the amount of meticulous detail that needs to go in running a tournament so the athletes I feel comfortable when they get there. And I'm often asked the question, what do you do as a tournament director? What do you actually do? Because, I said, well, I've actually run 46 major events around the world now. And I said, as a tournament director, what I do is create and manage atmosphere. It's all about creating the atmosphere for athletes and the crowd, and that'll transfer through TV. And the corollary to creating and managing atmosphere is the better the atmosphere, the luckier you get. And atmosphere is a function of people and space. So you're much better with a smaller stadium than a larger stadium. That's the key. Because there's nothing like a full house. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, and we've spoken about this throughout the home ground, haven't we, Max?
Yeah, look, it's
well, you're the home ground.
Well, we are the home ground, but it's the common theme, right? That sort of aspect of matching the size of the crowd with the facility is so important, because otherwise it just feels like there's no one there. There's no atmosphere. And
the problem I had when I ran golf, when I ran the Australian Open golf, how do you get atmosphere on a golf course when it's so big? I mean, you can't fill it like. The Australian Open we used to cut the size in half the second week. We'd shut down what's called John Cain Arena now, because you need to fit less people because there's less matches in a small space. Now they have the biggest rock festival in Australia there the second week. So, but how do you do in a golf course when you maybe got 10,000 people on the whole golf course? I mean, it's such a big area. So when I ran the Australian Open golf for the first time at Royal Sydney, which was, it's sort of a passion that I have for golf as well. So we can't sell out because it's too big. There's no way. And IMG, who had been running at the time, said, you've got to give all the tickets away. No, we can't give away tickets because, we need to get a revenue stream. So, in fact, there was a guy from IMG, Jonathan Field, and they had $50,000 in the budget for ticket sales for the Australian Open golf. Australian Open tennis does, tens of millions. I said, we'll make that $500,000 in ticket sales, not $50,000. They said, we've never done $100,000 in ticket sales in any golf tournament we've ever done in Australia. So I put $500,000 as a budget. He said, I'll walk with a bare backside down Burke Street if you do that. I said, okay, we'll see. So I thought I could have sell out something. So I said to Royal Sydney, have you ever had a grandstand on the 18th green? Because I'd been to St Andrews to see the grandstand. I said, no, we've never done that. So they went, okay. So I went to Harry the Hire and I said, you know what my question was? What's the smallest grandstand that you've got? Because I've got to sell it out. They said, we've got one for 200 people. Perfect. We'll take that one. So we put in a grandstand for 200 people. sold it out the first day for the Sunday, and then we sold out for Saturday. That's sold out. So now we're saying we've sold out the grandstand seating for the Australian Open. The ticket sales went wild. People thought, oh, maybe they're going to sell out. They sell out. We got $500,000 in ticket sales because of building a small grandstand, not a big one.
Yeah. Did he walk down the street with his backside showing?
No, he'd left IMG by that stage, so it's fine. It's all fine. But again, the atmosphere, and we create that feeling of atmosphere and the sellout pressure. And I mean, that's a wonderful, I see the A-League with these big stadiums. I go, what are they doing? What are they doing?
Mac, the late 80s. Let's rewind to the Hopman Cup. How did you convince the WA government and to get the Perth Arena built and purpose fit for that tournament? And what was the story around the Hopman Cup?
Well, it was dedicated to Mr. Hopman, who had a great influence on my career. He was a great Davis Cup captain before Neil Fraser was my captain. So Charlie Fank and I in Cashy, we wanted to dedicate it to Mr. Hopman because that's where my formative years as a player were in Eddie's Tennis Academy in Bardmore, Florida, in Tampa, Florida. So the thing was, where do you put it in Australia? Because there was so much tennis in the other cities. Perth didn't have anything, and they just lost the America's Cup, you see. And they'd formed this events corp, part of West Australian Development Corporation. So we thought, there's going to be an opportunity to have a major event in Perth. They've got obviously, they had football, and the Eagles were coming, and yada, 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 right? But no major event, and people in Melbourne think major events, it's not a big deal. Most cities, in New York City, there's only two big events, really. The US Open, by far the biggest, massive event, and the New York Mile, the New York Marathon and the Fifth Avenue Mile. That's it. They don't have all these events. Melbourne is incredible what we've got here. Right? It is the sporting capital because all the events we have, and we fill the calendar with events. Now, coming back to Perth, there had to be an opportunity post America's Cup to have something in Perth, and with Cashy on board, that was great. And we did a contingency deal with Steffi Graf that if the event happens, you will play and get this. So it was, and her manager was nice enough to do it. So we were able to go to the market with the two Wimbledon champions, Pat Cash and Steffi Graf. She won the Olympics, the Golden Slam that year. So that was pretty good. So then we got Channel 7, and then we still didn't have a city to play it in, but we've got two really good players. So we've got an event, it's dedicated to Mr. Hopman, got the two Wimbledon champions, got a TV network. Now we've got to find the city and the sponsor. So went to Perth, and they were interested in having an event to, post America's Cup. So they were on board. So the WA government was great. And then we got Swan Breweries through Swan Gold. So the funny story there was Alan Bond was the owner of Swan Gold at the time, late Alan Bond, and he came down and saw the signage and said he didn't like it because even though it was Swan Gold logo, he wanted to change the logo a little bit because he was actually a sign writer before he became a tycoon. So he didn't like the way the signage looked on TV. So all of these stories. So it got built. So that was at Burswood Dome. That was the Dallas Dempsey was the guy then, and there was no air conditioning. It's 40 degrees in Perth in summer. Like they had 36 days in a row over 36. We've got to have air conditioning. So they spent $1 million at the Burswood Dome to have the air conditioning. But what happened eventually is they needed real estate and they were pulling it down. So we did a mock-up of a new stadium there for the Hopman Cup that we thought the government needs to build this stadium, basically. And the mock-up we did, and we presented it at the tournament, was the site where now Optus Stadium is in Perth, actually, because it was next to Burswood, you see. And the government said, no, we can't have it there because we've got other plans for that area, which is now Optus Stadium, which is beautiful. But the Edgeley Entertainment Centre's pretty much falling over. We're going to put it in that site in the city. So that's how Perth Arena, which became RAC Arena, which actually is the best centre court viewing in all of Australia for tennis. It's unbelievable. So the Hopman Cup home was born then, and it's not the Hopman Cup there anymore. It went to ATP Cup, to United Cup. So now the United Cup is there. So sorry about the long answer.
No,
it takes time to get these stadiums built, and there's always the same as the one in Melbourne.
Yeah. I mean, there's one constant about you is that you're always happy to take a risk with something new.
Take a risk, yeah.
Whether it's with the the administration of tennis or one of the other sports. But there's a story that's very famous about you that in your career, you were the only player to move from a single-handed backhand to a double-handed backhand.
No one had ever done that in history. In the middle of your career. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the impact of that on your game? Because I know you said it was, a challenging period, and it might have been almost the end for you.
It was so close to the end because I was just in conversation with Chris Lewis from New Zealand and another guy, Dave Carter. His nickname was Space. He was from Queensland. He's a good guy, Space. And Chris Lewis, by the way, made the final of Wimbledon singles, which which is a very good effort because he didn't have an incredible game, but he made the final of Wimbledon. So because it was Peter McNamee, Chris Lewis, and myself, we're all hanging out at Hopman's, and so we're just having a conversation. What do we regret? I moved off the obvious subject of women onto professionally, and regret. Well, I said I regret I didn't have a two-handed backhand, but Borg's hitting it great. He was the same age as me, but this guy knows how to play. He knows how to play. I wish I'd had a two-handed backhand like Bjorn Borg. So because I'd kind of copied his forehand a little bit, and Space said, well, why don't you change? And Chris Lewis says, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So because I'm 24, I'm ranked 80 in the world, 85. That's decent ranking. Now they think that's great if you're top 100, right? But it was decent ranking because you're in the Grand Slams and all that. And I thought, I started thinking about it. So went to Europe. Mac and I Peter McNamara, the late Peter McNamara, unfortunately, and we won our first two doubles tournaments, ATP, at Nice and Cairo. Then I'm flying back to Florida. I just decided to switch. I said, I'm going to tell Mr. Hopman I'm switching. I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to switch. I just decided to switch. So, and I thought, if I don't make it back, I'll go back. I had a science degree from Monash, but I thought I hadn't finished my law degree. Fortunately, my son has since finished that. But I'll go back, finish my law degree, and maybe I can be better than the 80th best lawyer or something, So, so anyway, it took me 10 hours a day in the heat in Florida. Work on my backhand, like 10 hours a day. Like I had blisters. I had to wear a glove on my hand because the blisters. So I go back on tour, can't win a match. Went months, couldn't win a match. So my ranking's starting to melt, can't win a match. And I finally in Palermo in Sicily, and I'm playing a guy I'm not going to lose to. He's from Melbourne, actually, Ernie Ewart, a good guy. I'm going to beat Ernie, for sure, because he got in as lucky loser. I lost to Ernie. I said, now it's out there. This experiment has failed. The problem was it wasn't an experiment. So this is what I'll come to. I go down the back wall in Palermo, the tennis club. Typically got a great restaurant for Italian food, clay courts, what I love. The whole thing's great, but I just can't beat anybody. I can't win a match. So I go down the back wall and start hitting some old one-hand backhands against the wall. And I'm walking back like this. I see Oni Parent from New Zealand, who was a good player, made the final of the Australian Open. And Oni goes, what's the matter? I said, I'm just going through a hard time. He said, you played Ernie today, right? And I said, yeah. He said, how'd you go? I said, I lost. You lost to Ernie. So Oni says, did you play that two-hand backhand in that match? He goes, I go, yeah. He goes, Paul, tell me the truth. Could you have beaten Ernie with your one-hand backhand? Of course. He said, well, you had a duty to give your best performance. You didn't give your best performance in that match. And you have, as a professional, you should be winning the match with your one hand, practicing your two hand, and when it's ready, bring it to the match. I said, I understand what you're saying, Oni. There's a logic that, but that's just not where I'm at. I keep walking further. I run into Carlos Kirameyer from Brazil, who coached Gabi Sabatini to beat Everton and Navratilova. These are names a long time ago, but they were very good players. Okay. I won a Wimbledon mixed with Martina Navratilova. Great lady, just extraordinary lady. Has helped the world a lot. So I run into Carlos and he goes, Paul, you're not looking well. What's the matter? He goes, oh, Carlos, I've just done a bad thing. He goes, why? I said, you're Brazilian, right? You know the Bible, the whole thing. I'm not particularly religious at all, right? But I said, the story about Judas in the Bible, right? I just went down the back of Palermo tennis. I just went down the back wall and started hitting one-hand backhand. So I feel like I'm Judas. I'm selling out. He says, why? I said, well, when I switched to the two hands, I made a pact with myself that I would never hit another one-handed backhand. If it didn't work, I was going to go back to university, do my thing at Monash, right? I said, I made the pact. That's my problem. And I just broke my pact. And so that's why I feel like I do now. And he said to me, he goes, what are the boys saying? I said, Macca, Louis, all the boys, they're just, you're nuts. What are you doing? You're just throwing your career away. And I said, I thought I could do that, but now in the crunch, my career is basically gone. It's not so easy to leave this life, the lifestyle, playing Wimbledon, Australian Open, French Open. I was doing well in doubles. I'm throwing it away. I'm now, Carlos, now I see it wasn't as easy for me to just give it up as I thought. So he said, that's what the boys are saying. Okay. So he grabbed me and he said, you don't listen to the boys, you listen to me. You have to keep going with this. I can tell, I'm looking deep. You have to keep going. Don't listen to the boys. You keep going with that backhand. I know you haven't won a match for 6 months. You have to keep going. I said, really? I said, Carlos, you've just lifted this amazing burden off me. Thank you. The next week, okay, I go to Barcelona, play good American clay court players, top 50, ranked higher than me. I beat him. So now I've had a good win on clay against a good player. The second round I'm playing Jose Louis Clerc. He reached the final of the French Open in singles. Good player. Lost to Lendl in the final. He's number 2 in the world. So it's not a fairy tale, guys, but I won a set of Jose Louis Clerc on clay. I lost 6-3 in the third to Jose Louis Clerc. That's the best tennis I've ever played in my life. The very week after, I've lost to Ernie, from Melbourne, who's ranked 350. I was already a better player. 3 months later, Mac and I won the Australian Open in doubles. I win my first ATP singles, beat Stan Smith. I beat McEnroe in the French Open in singles, third round. Peter and I win Wimbledon. That's all within 12 months of that Palermo deal. I mean, so that was that close to quitting, but there was a mentor came along and saved me. And you think, I know my stuff. I thought I knew it, whatever. We all need that person somewhere in our life, and he saved me, Carlos.
That was what a sliding doors moment.
Oh yeah, it sure was
Amazing.
Otherwise, we'd talk about law here or something.
Yeah, but we can.
The law
sports
ground.
Law, yeah. I did.
But Paul, what we can talk about is your amazing story of naming Rod Laver Arena when you were tournament director of the Australian Open, and the story about telling Rod Laver himself. Explain that to us.
Well, I mean, Rod's a great man. I mean, and we were there. He went to Lou Hode's funeral when we were running a tournament to raise money for Lou's. He had terrible illness. He ended up passing away. So Rocket and all those guys came, and so Rod Laver's nickname's Rocket. So and Ken Rose, all those guys. So I was at the US Open, and they just renamed Arthur Ashe Stadium. It was called Arthur Ashe Stadium, and then Roland Garros had just called it Philippe Chatrier Stadium. So, I was doing media at the US Open, promoting the new second court, which I had quite a bit to do with. I mean, do you want the quick backstory on that? Was that we knew we needed a 10,000 seat second stadium like French Open and US Open had, and we had Margaret Court was only 5,000 seats, so we knew we had a bigger one. So, how can we help the government realise here that we need a bigger second court? So Andre Agassi's playing the Australian Open for the first time. Pretty big name, right? Ends up winning the tournament, beats Sampras in the final, right? And so this is 95. So they're talking about, is it possible the second, the Commonwealth Games is coming, to Melbourne when they actually had it here. But anyway, I said to Andre, Andre, you're going to have to play once outside, outside centre court, which the top players don't realise. He said, well, that's okay, not first round play. So third round, we knew Jeff Kennett, the Premier's coming to the tennis that day. Andre's on Margaret Court. It was chaos. I mean, Agassi's playing on Margaret Court. We can't fit the people. The government saw that, look, we've got an issue with crowds there at Melbourne Park. And so he came back to us. I wrote a letter to Jeff Kennedy. He came back to me and said, look, we're hosting Commonwealth Games. It must have been 90, was it 98 or 2002, this Commonwealth Games, whenever it was, in Melbourne. I can't remember the date.
2006.
It happened anyway. 2006. Yeah. So they said we need a velodrome, a cycling track, so we could combine it with multi-purpose. So it was a multi-purpose arena. And so they got it built. Coming back to Rod Laver, so that was great. And then it's now called John Cain Arena. So we got that big second stadium, and the growth of the Australian Open really blossomed with having this infrastructure we have and linked to Melbourne at the centre of the city, the whole thing. So I'm at the media conference, they're talking about Arthur Ashe. They said, well, you got the new arena, it was Centre Court, it was called, at Melbourne Park. It was Flinders Park originally, but then Melbourne Park. There's been a lot of name changes. So they said, what are you going to call the second arena? I said, well, that has to have a commercial name, because for the government to justify building the velodrome and that, it ended up being Vodafone and ended up took the naming rights. I said, but it's interesting you ask that question, because we know the second arena will have a commercial name, but it does raise the question between the two arenas. It means the Centre Court could be dedicated to a great Australian, They said, yeah. And they said, who would that be? Well, I said, and I knew I was going outside my territory a little bit, because I haven't really got the authority to be naming arenas after people. I said, it's not my decision, of course, but I couldn't think of a better person to name it after than Rod Laver, because he's the only person in the history of tennis to have won 2 Grand Slams. He's a great guy, humble, and so Rod Laver Arena's got a pretty good ring to it. That started the ball rolling to the government. Victorian government was a little nervous about being he's not a Victorian, etc., you know how it works, but how could you go past Rod Laver Arena? So we named it Rod Laver Arena. The government signed up. So then Tennis Australia said, who's going to tell Rod? And they came to me and gave me the honour of telling Rod. So I got to tell Rod, and the first thing he said is, he just couldn't believe it. He goes, ahead of Lou Hode. So he was so humble, he felt Lou Hode was a better player. And Lou did beat him many times, and in a row. And Lou is also a great guy. And Lou's got nothing named after him, by the way, because he's got Ken Rosewell Arena in Sydney, you've got Pat Raft Arena in Brisbane, you've got Rod Laver Arena in Melbourne. Lou is, in my opinion, the best Australian tennis player in history. And there's nothing named after him, so that's a little bit of something that's...
And the proviso for that is that he didn't have the record that Laver had, but he had a better game in the opinion of a lot of people.
Yeah, well, Pancho Gonzalez said, was a great player. He said, if there's one person to represent the planet Earth for an intergalactic invasion, it's Lou Hode. That's who you send out. Because Lou on his day was untouchable.
Okay.
Untouchable.
What about the innovation at the Australian Open? Your time as 12 years as tournament director compared to now. I know it's a different era, but how do you see the change in the event over those 2 periods?
Well, my role when I was made tournament director and then CEO was to bring the Australian Open up to the level of the other 3 Grand Slams. We were the junior partner. We didn't have the prize money. We didn't have the ranking points, all that stuff. So after Agassi played Sampras my first year, I said to Jeff Pollard, the president, let's go to the ATP. We've got to get equal ranking points. That was the first final that Agassi and Sampras has played. It's a bit like Alcaraz and Sinner, their first final they played. That's a big deal, right? Yeah. Well, Federer and Nadal, Federer Djokovic. So we only then, after I'd been there a year, that we got the equal points for men and women, the ranking points. We had lower ranking points than the other 3 Grand Slams. And then, of course, we had, to be honest, the potential of the best infrastructure. I mean, it is the best infrastructure of any Grand Slam, and it's walking distance from the city. I mean, this sports precinct in Melbourne is the best in the world. There is no doubt about that. And you throw in the Formula One over the road at Albert Park. I mean, it is extraordinary what we have here. And so with that potential and with the support of the Victorian government, have been enormous, it is developing into the best sporting precinct in the world. There is no doubt about that. And it's got the arts as well. So I don't know if people understand. I mean, they say, oh, Melbourne this, Melbourne that. I'm not saying it is, if it is the most livable city, which Melbourne is up there, but in terms of the sporting precinct, it is the best in the world. There's nothing like it anywhere in the world, and that's why more, and you throw in Phillip on the 500cc Grand Prix. People here are so sport. It's incredible what we have here.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many things you did in that time as CEO and tournament director, but one thing that perhaps people don't really know is that one of the key changes you made was making the final at night.
Yes.
Yeah, tell us about the combination of stories and things that led to that.
You've done your research. That was a big thing, because I always believed, an AFL were humming and hawing, let's beat the AFL. They like to run the world. I mean, I had a stint in AFL, but tell us what to be concerned about all the time. Okay, that's fine. But this is international sport, okay? Yeah. So I thought, we need a night final. And no Grand Slam had a men's final in history. in history. So let's be the first Grand Slam to have a men's final in prime time. So I went to Bruce McWilliam, who was the head of acquisitions over at Channel 7. He was the right-hand man to, he was the guy. And Bruce, night final, he said, "You'll never live to see it." Wow, no chance. Head of Channel 7, right? Like, no chance. And he's kind of the razor cutter. He was a tough guy. He said Sunday night is sacrosanct in Australian culture. It's the Sunday night movie. Families have their dinner together, sit down and watch the movie together. You guys are maybe too young to remember that, but it was very much part of the Australian.
I'm on the cusp.
I'm looking at the technical help here. Definitely don't remember that. But it was Sunday night movie was so important. He said it'll never happen. So I thought, how do you make something happen that you've been told will never happen? So it's got to be like water going around a rock, because I'm a bit into that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, okay.
I'm sort of getting the impression of that.
Yeah. How do you go past an immovable object?
Yeah.
Well, water gets around it. It goes over it, under it, or around it, right? You've got to find a way. So I need a plan to do this. So I thought, it's not going to happen overnight, because we've got another 3 or 4 years on our contract. So, so we just let it go. So what I did was, the nights were doing really well, because I made a match of the day was the night match. So, I also because my predecessor, Colin Stubbs, didn't like asking the guys to play at night, because they didn't really like it at the time. But I said, Andre, you got to play one night, and I knew he maybe didn't want to play the next round at night. So the key as a tournament director is you never ask a player a question if you don't know what the answer is going to be. So I knew Andre was going to say no to playing on the Wednesday night, but I knew if he won that match, he'd be playing Rafter on Friday night. I said, can you play? So I said, we'd like you to play tomorrow night, the Wednesday night, even though I wanted him against Rafter on Friday night. He said, no, I don't want to do that. He said, well, then you'll have to play Friday night. He said, okay. So now we've got Friday night Rafter, and or was it the fourth round on the Monday, whatever it was, went off the scale. So the ratings just went ballistic. So that was a big turning point. So
certainly buttered them up with that.
Well, the Knights are going well. The Knights are suddenly, instead of being dogs, basically, they're now everything. So I thought, you know what I'll do is I'll split the semis between Thursday and Friday, which they don't do now. But I do you remember the men's semis were split on Thursday, Friday night, because it was a stronger rating product, just reality. So I put one on Thursday night, and then we had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night. So instead of the women's semis day Thursday and the men's semis day Friday, put a men's semi Thursday night and the other semi Friday day. And that went great. And because they got 2 days off of the final, no big deal. So then I went to 7 and said, look, Thursday night went great. The next year, let's do the Friday night semi-final. So now we've got the 2 semis, Thursday night, Friday night. Went great. So then the renegotiation's coming up with the contract with 7. This is 3 or 4 years later. I'm still got this dream of the night final. And we're in the... I said, we're almost done. And 7, what's your problem? We agreed the dollars, the whole thing. I said, there's one more thing. He said, what? Bruce McNamee. I said, what? I said, well, we've got a problem, because with the semi-finals being at night, the players are saying the final should be in the same conditions as the semi-final, which was my whole plan all along. Like, Roger Federer is thinking if the semi's at night, the final should be at night. And I knew that I'm on my turf now, because I'm a player, was a player. The top players, I know where they think. What's Bruce McWilliam going to say about Roger Federer thinking the final should be at night? So
what did he say?
He said, will that do it? Will that do the deal? I said, yeah, that'll do it. He said, okay, done. We'll have the final at night. It was done. And it was the highest. Hewitt got through. He beat Roddick in the semi. Safin beat Federer from match point down the other side. The Hewitt, that final, and it was the Centenary Australian Open, 2005. All the bells and whistles, the book, the movie, the whole thing.
Hewitt took the first set.
Hewitt took well. There's a story about that too. He wins the first set, and he's winning easy, and he nearly breaks Safin early in the second. and they both had the same trainer, and I'm sitting in the box courtside, and and Ivan Brixey, Ivan Kuterman, and I said, Ivan, Hewitt calls the trainer late, and he said, no, he's just got a little, just his taping, he's fine. Second said, Marat's gone, he's struggling, and Marat asked for the trainer, and Ivan goes out, got the same trainer, because they can pick who was training they want. They both liked Ivan. I said to Ivan, I said, what's the matter with Marat? He said, he's lonely. He's getting killed, and he just needed somebody to talk to. He's depressed. He needs someone to talk to. There's nothing wrong with him. So he just wanted to talk to somebody. So he called the trainer so he could talk. So he broke Hewitt in the next game, changed the match.
It's the most consequential couple of minutes possibly in Australian sporting history.
Because you shouldn't be calling the trainer to just have a chat.
No, that's it.
But he did, and Marat's Marat, he did weird things.
Yeah.
So that changed the match. So anyway, Marat ends up winning, but that match averaged over 4 million viewers. It outrated Kathy Freeman's gold medal. It was the highest rating television event in the history of Australian television until the Matildas just beat it.
Yeah.
It was number 2. Everyone talked about Kathy Freeman. Yeah, Kathy peaked for 3 minutes higher than the Australian Open Grand Final. The Australian Open Final. But we had 4 million viewers average for 4 hours.
Yeah.
So this never going to happen. Channel 7 had the greatest fill-up you could ever imagine. So, of course, that the rest is history with the business of sport, and now what Nine's paying and the whole thing, it's gone. So that was how we got a night final. So I always believed that if someone says it's actually words were it's impossible, how can you plan a way around it? But you need really good planning, and you need to keep it to yourself. I didn't share those plans with anybody. I just did it.
Yep.
So what would you say to some of the other codes that have grappled with that idea? AFL's talked about a grand final at night, Grand Prix.
Well, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it's easier for rugby because they've got the holiday in Sydney on the next day, because obviously that makes a big difference. But on a Saturday night, Sunday's the next day. Look, I don't understand. Well, I don't know. Look, they own so many nights. I mean, unfortunately they've taken over winter AFL. They've got too many nights. I know people won't come to Melbourne in winter because of AFL. They just won't come to Melbourne. I mean, it's great and we love it and the whole thing, except it's too much. They've taken over. I think they've taken too much territory. But I think a night final is kind of a no-brainer a little bit.
Just a question, Paul, on the current day Australian Open, the precinct and all the activity around it. Do you think the event's been forced into being that type of event, or do you think the focus unnecessarily has been taken away from tennis in the modern day version of the Australian Open?
Okay, well, to make it the equivalent of the others, we had to merge sport, technology and entertainment. So we had to make it. We had to Australianise the Australian Open. You go to Wimbledon, and it's got that beautiful look and feel, the heritage, the history. That's not there all year. They bring all the stuff in the week before. I mean, the flowers and everything you see at Wimbledon is not there 12 months a year. It's all shipped in, right? Roland Garros is so chic, it reflects Paris. US Open's in New York. New York's in your face. They all reflect the cultures. The Australian Open was a bit like, it was like copied Wimbledon with the schedule, and it copied the US Open as a hardcourt event with a look and feel. So I had an expression how not to do it like Wimbledon. How not to do it like Wimbledon, even though Wimbledon was the standard, because it's not Australian. We don't have British culture. We don't have the pecking order. We don't have the weather of the UK. Why have we got the same schedule? We are an egalitarian society by nature. We're unfortunately losing a little bit, I feel a little bit, but basically we're an egalitarian society where everyone's welcome. So I had a thing with the ground pass. Wherever you are in the world, come and enjoy summer in Melbourne. And I would have beach volleyball demonstrations, even if it was cold. Like, this is the first day of summer. How cold is it, right? Because we wanted everyone to believe that coming to the Australian Open, you were coming out of Europe or the US into a beautiful summer, and you experience that. So we did change the brand to, the courtside deli became the beach bar and barbecue. I can go on and on. All the changes we made. We had Australian entertainment, not American entertainment or British. So we made everything. Every decision was we're Australian and we've got to reflect Australia and its culture. And we're the Australian Open, not the Melbourne Open.
Yep.
It's not just about Melbourne. Then when we got too big for being Australian, came up with the Grand Slam of Asia Pacific and got Kia, and still to this day the longest running major sporting sponsor almost in the world. So you have got to tweak along the way. But we went from Australia's biggest sporting event as a catchphrase to the Grand Slam of Asia Pacific. But it was also to knock off the Grand Prix in Adelaide, who were trying to make out they were the biggest event. Mate, they go for 4 days. We go for 3 weeks.
Yes.
The Australian Open is gigantic.
I mean, you've had a lot of really important senior roles, but I think looking at your history, the most important must have been being King of Moomba in 1987.
Oh, look, I went with my wife. We thought apparently it's in the town hall. I'm on the wall there somewhere, right? As a King of Moomba, they've got some display of all the Kings of Moomba. So I tried to go. We tried to go the other day to show my wife, and they said, no, we only do tours twice a week. You've got to book it in advance. Okay. So I still haven't seen it, but apparently it's on the wall there. Yeah. So that's an honour, obviously. Yeah.
Paul, it's not just major events. You've got a granular side to yourself, a grassroots passion of yours at the Mornington Peninsula.
Well, yeah, look, I've always loved coaching as well. I was lucky enough to be involved with Sue Wei Shea, who's won 5 Wimbledon so far, which is good, and in doubles and mixed doubles. But the thing is, European clay is where players learn how to play. In Australia, we grew up on grass. That's what we dominated for so long. And then we've got the hard courts came with the Australian Open. That all makes sense. But European clay was almost non-existent. Tennis Australia have put in some, which is good. But for example, I spent a lot of time in the Peninsula, and kids down there, if they dream of making it, they really have to go to Melbourne and even then, where do they get the clay courts? So Rosebud Tennis Club, which is the nearest tennis club to Cape Schanck, where my wife and I spend a lot of time, is putting in 8 European clay courts, which is unbelievable. Cremonini clay, which is Italian, and I'm going to help that become a hub on the Mornington Peninsula. So if a kid on the peninsula dreams of making it, they now have a surface they can develop their games. I mean, 80% of the top 100 men and women are European. So you've got to play on clay if you want to be a player. That's where you learn the nuances of the sport. It's compared to hard court, it's playing chess compared to playing drafts. Clay and European clay is so different on undercard. So I'm really excited about this project and helping the club become a hub on the southern Mornington Peninsula in particular, and helping the dreams of kids down there. So we'll see.
Good on you, Paul. It's been a journey. I wouldn't like to be inside your head because I reckon it's going in a lot of different directions.
Sometimes, but I have my slow moments as well. We've got to watch the water sometimes.
There. Well, guess what? We're going to get inside your head in part 2 of the Paul McNamee chat. Max, it's been great, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Look forward to the second part.
We'll see you soon on the home ground.